get stray. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And this is going to be a video from Better You. So, the topic for today is going to be about relationships. In particular, how to deal with the relationship once it's ended. And one thing I kind of get asked about from time to time is about rekindling an old relationship with someone, and we're going to touch on that as well. So let's start with the first part, a relationship that's ended. How to kind of, for lack of a better term, recover. There's a few things I always recommend people do. In the best case scenario, you had a cathartic end, and it's simply getting over that hurt and sting. But once again, that is best case scenario, and that's not going to be the reality for most people. However, if you can, I recommend reaching out to that person and seeing if you can have one final conversation with them. If things ended on a somewhat amicable or mutual terms, a lot of times that's not going to be a problem at all. If you would anticipate reaching out and having a conversation to be some type of negative or perceived as negative by that other person, then I would highly encourage you not to reach out and not to pursue that. Because just as much as, and this is kind of assuming that you're on the hurtful end of the breakup, just as much as a breakup affects you, the other person is affected too. And that's one thing that we always kind of lose sight in. Because if you get dumped or if something gets broken off with you, you feel like that other person just kind of going on about their day and like they never think about you or anything like that. And to some extent, it may be true. But if they invested anything in you and had any serious feelings for you at any point in time, then while they may feel like they did the right thing, that's not to say that they never have any fleeting thoughts or think of you at all, or are completely unaffected by it. Just as much as you're going to have to process and get through emotions, they are too. So, with that being said, assuming either that is or isn't an option, the next step to recovering from a breakup, and this would be, the rest of these are going to be assumed that you can't have that cathartic conversation with that person. Visualize. One exercise that I learned while getting my life coaching certification was the importance of visualization. And essentially what you would do with this exercise would be, when you're alone, kind of in your private time, you would just visualize that person sitting in that room, and you would say everything that you would want to say to that person. And good, bad, indifferent, whatever it may be. And to some extent, I know some folks even kind of visualize and anticipate what their responses would be to what they say and release out into the air. But visualization, what it's going to do is it's going to allow some of that tension that's been inside of you, some of that hurt, some of that pain. It's going to start the process of letting that go and healing. It's important to remember that anytime you go through a relationship, or anytime you hurt, or anytime we encounter any type of adversity in life, It's not a loss. It doesn't mean that we can't be redeemed. It doesn't mean that, we only have down to go from here or anything like that. It's a learning experience. And it's a growth opportunity. And how we respond to it determines how much we will grow and how much better we would be on the other side of it. The next exercise kind of ties into the visualization a little bit, but it's trauma tracing. So kind of like think of it kind of like a Rona trace, contact trace, where if one person contacted this person and spoke with that person, like you want to let everybody know. It's kind of the same thing. So you can do this with a relationship and kind of write out a list of all the things that person did. And if it was a particularly, I'd say, eventful relationship, they might be kind of several things that kind of built up to the point where you're at right now and kind of how you got there. So, for example, it could be, we talked for 4 years, and in this relationship, just for example, say, they completely detached. They said very abusive and hurtful things, gave no forethought and regard, was very unempathetic, things like that. And I'm being really general with those, but you'll know what those specific things are that offended and hurt you. And what you'll kind of do is write all those things out and reflect on them. Once you got a complete and total list, and once you got that complete and total list, you would write a letter to that person in totality. Now, you may be compelled to kind of write a few different drafts of it, and I would kind of advise that as well. And what you want to do is write and release out all that passion, that negative energy, that hurt. And ideally, what you would see is the first draft. That's where the most of your emotion would come out. It would be the rawest form of what happened. And as you complete that first draft and begin to write your second, third, or maybe even fourth draft, you should refine it in a way that takes some of the negativity, sorry, I can't speak today. Take some of the negative triggering emotion out of it. So not being so much accusatory, not the quote unquote, you ain't this, you ain't that type of language, so on and so forth. But rather getting it down to a cause and effect type of deal. Like for example, it could be something as simple as, we agreed that we would meet up and we would do certain activities, and not only did we not meet up and do those things, but I felt completely neglected when there was no communication involved at all. And there was evidence that other things were happening, and that I basically had been stood up. That's an example of the type of communique that you would want to distill it down to. And once you kind of get it down to that, for lack of a better term, professional level, just kind of reflect on it and meditate it and do the exercise as much as you need to. And then finally, work on your physicals. And I don't mean this in any superficial means, but I'm a firm believer that the mind, the body, and the soul are linked, and the health of one affects the health of the other. So if you emotionally are hurting, one thing that can kind of help a bit, one, with getting your mind off of it a little bit, and also giving you that moment time to help process it, is working out. Working out, what it's going to do is it's going to get your blood flowing. It's going to, help you drop a couple pounds, maybe put on a couple pounds of muscle, sculpt yourself. But often a lot of people, when they go through something that's emotionally traumatic, turning to working out is a good way to kind of get that time to help process through those emotions. And it does release certain endorphins, which can genuinely help your mood. Endorphins are chemicals that are released by certain centers of the brain that can affect our mood. And generally, endorphins are, I guess, for lack of a better term, are uppers. So they'll tend to make you feel more happier, more jovial. And then finally, just kind of tying into the last point as well, just work on yourself anyway in general. So whether it be going further in your education, pursuing some type of certification, pursuing certain projects, whatever it may be, what you want to do is get moving, because what you don't want to do is stay stagnant and stay wallowing in whatever it is that has affected you. Because when you wallow there, what can tend to happen is you tend to ferment, and negativity, it'll go from this person did X, Y, and Z, and it can start to become internalized. And once it becomes internalized, it goes from simply being hurt from a bad breakup to becoming a depression and having a serious negative effect on your mental and emotional health. So that's, while it's okay to feel hurt, it's okay to feel slighted, it's perfectly natural. If you didn't, you probably weren't invested in that relationship, and you wouldn't be doing any of those exercises anyway. You really wouldn't give a damn. Like, if you could talk to somebody and y'all in your interactions and there's no feeling whatsoever there, I mean, it's one of two things: either you're a narcissist or you weren't emotionally invested. And I don't believe that there are as many narcissists as maybe some social media posts and whatnot would have you think. But I do believe that sometimes we may perceive some people as being emotionally invested in us or in a relationship when they aren't. And that's perfectly okay. Once again, learning opportunity. It's one of those things where you can learn certain signs and hopefully recognize certain patterns, so that if you begin dating somebody else or begin investing in somebody else, you're able to kind of recognize certain patterns and nip things in the bud before you yourself end up hurt. And then, another point, final point. After you've gone through an emotionally traumatic experience, you need to evaluate things, kind of do an autopsy of how things unfolded and what happened, and if necessary, determine if there were certain standards or barriers to yourself that could have helped you from being taken advantage of or hurt in that particular way. There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. I'm not saying become a walled garden, but in order for certain people to interact with you, there are certain prerequisites. For example, I'm a person, and anybody that knows me knows that I operate on respect. Respect is currency for me. So if something disrespectful is done to me, more often than not, I'm just simply not going to engage. Because to continue to engage would facilitate the recurrence of the behavior. And without proper respect being paid, sometimes, without proper respect being paid, frankly, some relationships are going to end up cut off. Simply because I'm not going to allow anybody to be able to abuse me and my mental. And, if you're invested in somebody and they do something that hurts you, and they all talk it out and it keeps happening and there's no change in behavior, that's disrespect. Like, a lot of people perceive disrespect as being like solely calling someone out of their name, or particular gestures or whatnot. But there are a lot of subtle and less overt ways that somebody can be disrespectful. For example, like constantly over talking and cutting them off, not letting them get a word in edgewise during a conversation, or even not conversing at all. More or less conversing only when you want to converse. Like, some people call it negging or micro ghosting. Basically, it's like, yo, you reach out, it's like, hey, what's up? Hey, have a little conversation, go back and forth a few times, and then boom, you don't hear anything for a couple days, and they hit you back up like y'all were just in the middle of a conversation. And that's not to say that, like, oh, you text them, they should be texting you right back within 60 seconds. Nah, because we all busy, we all got life, and we know when we're all adults. We know when a conversation has come to an end, or we've fleshed out in topic. And when we're in the middle of something, or if somebody's reaching out and asking something and we just flat out don't respond, consistently not responding, I should add. Because it's one thing, like, if somebody, say, works a particularly busy job, and sometimes, you might look at it and not get it, whatever. But those are one-offs. So, after a breakup, those are my tips to kind of starting the healing process and working on yourself to get over it. And if it's especially traumatic, if it's especially jarring, and I would kind of anticipate this would be the case for those who are heavily invested in their relationships, so like super long-term relationships, even people who just love hard marriages. Like, if you find yourself dwelling on it and it's been a while, and it doesn't seem like that feeling is waning at all, like that sting is still just as potent as day one, it might be a good thing to consider going and seeing a counselor. Just as we wouldn't put a Band-Aid on a broken arm and expect everything to be cool, we can't treat our emotional and mental health like that. Like, if it's significant and traumatic and severe, the same way we would take that broken arm to the ER, we need to take our psyche and our heart to a counselor and be seen and get the appropriate help necessary. But that's been it for me today. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and tune in for more.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love